Hey everybody, my name is Chris Lambert, and this is the Kanye West discussion for Tuesday, June 5th, 2018, presented by Watching the Throne, a lyrical analysis of Kanye West, the number one Kanye West podcast in the world. There's some Kanye news going on, but it seems, just a little random to me, not making necessarily for the best or most interesting discussion. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some questions that people had on Ye, the album. And if you have questions that you want me to answer in tomorrow's video, barring that some big news doesn't happen on Wednesday, then by all means, comment, send a message, tweet at us, and I'll get to it tomorrow. But in the meantime, these are some of the questions that we have, and let's get into them. AOT for Life said, if the album is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of his bipolarism, would the first 3 tracks be Hyde, 4 through 6 be Jekyll, and 7 be the combination of both? Or is the first 3 tracks Hyde, 4 be the realization of what Hyde has done, and 5 to 7 be Jekyll? I think it's more the latter. First 3 tracks are Hyde, 4 is this kind of coming out of what had just happened and looking around and being like, oh shit, I caused all of that. And 5 through 7 being changing. I think to put it into perspective for a lot of us, I think we've all had drunken nights or drunken weekends or just stretches of time where we weren't our best selves. And you kind of wake up at one point and look around and survey the damage that you've caused. And you're kind of like, oh shit. And then hopefully you make some healthy changes in your life. I think a lot of that is what's going on here. And we also know from the source that we talked to that was on the audio engineering team for Ye, that a lot of the purpose of this album was Kanye trying to reclaim himself from the not the performance art he had become, but the performer he had become. And he felt that it kind of robbed him of his individuality. And got him into a state of being that wasn't quite him, which would be this Hyde personality. So it's at once looking at his own dealings with bipolarism, but also dealing with this monster of a person that celebrity had made him, that he felt he had to be as a celebrity. And we kind of get that dynamic at play with the Charlemagne the God interview contrasting the TMZ interview. You can see the TMZ interview in these first 3 tracks, and you can see the Charlemagne the God interview in tracks 4 through 7. These 2 different aspects of Ye that it's the same man, but in one environment he acts this way, in another environment he acts this way. And how do you grapple with that? How does he grapple with that? We're all changed by the environment that we're in. You're different at work than you are with your friends. You're different with your friends than you are with your significant other. Hopefully not too much different, but, So I think that's kind of what's going on. Who Jiggy commented, I personally think this is me, not the expert music analyzer, whatever the fuck their title is. Yeah, expert music, yeah. No, we're just, our specialty is narrative and thematic deconstruction. But I think it's him killing off the new egotistic Kanye. 1 through 3 is new Kanye, 4 is the turning point where he learns to appreciate Kim for what she is forever, and 5 through 7 is basically the new rejuvenated Kanye, healing all the wounds, and the Nicki outro closes off the new egotistic Kanye era that started on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. The new egotistic Kanye era, actually, just to be that guy, Kanye nerd, you can see it kick off in Graduation. That's where the innocent Kanye that was on College Dropout and Late Registration kind of vanishes, right, with I Wonder. He'd still been part of Chicago, but on I Wonder, after getting a taste of that high life on Stronger, he wants to explore more outside and go out into the world, which is why the next song is Good Life and focuses on going city to city to city to city and experiencing this good life. What follows from Good Life? Nothing but ego, Barry Bonds, Can't Tell Me Nothing, Drunken Hot Girls, Everything I Am, Flashing Lights, The Glory. It's just ego on ego on ego on ego until he tries to go back home on homecoming and is told, no, you can't go back on home. You can't come home. Like, what we had was great, but you're that guy now. And we get that a little bit with Big Brother, right? You see on Big Brother that Kanye started off innocent, and then he's in this battle with Jay-Z as he's trying to get on Jay-Z's level. But his ego at one point causes a rift between him and Jay. And this is him apologizing. This is him taking away his ego from it at the end of the album, instead of saying like, Jay, hey, I beat you. It's like, Jay, I'm so sorry. You're my big brother. You're the king. Everything was just me trying to be you. I'm an idiot. So that song kind of encapsulates the journey of the ego and the development of the ego that we see on the rest of the album. And then we get 808s and Heartbreak with Jesus Christ. But he embraces, in a way, that celebrity persona on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, falling into the fantasy and never really waking up. We get Yeezus on the next album, which is this caricature of a man, followed by Pablo, another caricature of Kanye, until we ultimately drop the characters and come back to Ye himself. So I do think, in a way, that this is also the killing of the new Kanye, the killing of Yeezus, more the Pablo Kanye coming out. We're going to use those terms on our episode, track by track deconstruction of the album. But it's more than new Kanye. It's also not necessarily just a killing off, but also an acceptance of. Kanye can't kill off the manic or the depressive parts of his personality. Being that he is bipolar, those things just don't go away because you're like, I killed them, they're gone. Those are always going to be part of him that he has to deal with. And coming to that understanding and realization is crucial. So I don't think it's as simple either as just, that part of me's gone. There's more nuance to it than that. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Hinata Moreau, is that right? I'm so sorry. I'm so bad with pronouncing things. Why didn't he address any of the racism issues he was bringing up recently on Twitter? Not that I think he has to or should have, but just curious. Ali kind of answered this. He actually kind of addressed it on his last interview and said that it was a bit too sensitive to talk about. On his album, he also removed some lines that talked about that. And I don't know if he's necessarily trying to excuse his behavior or say I was wrong, but a lot of this album positions in the front half the ego speaking, that mania speaking, and then him checking himself on the last half of the album, realizing that he's upset the love of his life, realizing that he has to nurture his daughters and can't just be this crazy person saying and doing the kinds of things that he says and does on whatchamacallit, what's the second track? Yikes. And All Mine. I mean, he even calls that track Yikes, which is such a meta overview of what he's, like, how he's responding to himself. So I think part of it is that he knows he's trying to say something and that he's been on something, not on something like drugs wise, but he's been onto something with being forward thinking. Like, he's thinking like George Jetson, but speaking like George Jefferson is what he says. And I think that it's him kind of realizing that how he was going about it wasn't quite right. The same way that he realized that how he was viewing women, like the all mine view on women, wasn't right. That was the monster pre-dad Ye talking. And now that he's a dad, he has a completely different view. He's not the all mine guy. So maybe it's stretching, and I'm sure there's people that are going to say I'm just being a biased Kanye fan, which I get that criticism. But I could view him as thinking that my showing that I've realized that I was wrong in these other views is showing that I think I may have been wrong in those views as well, and I'm trying to improve and understand and learn, and hopefully I'll speak better in the future. But that could be completely wrong. And we still haven't done our line-by-line analysis yet. That's going to be coming over the next 7 weeks. So take that answer not with a grain of salt. I feel pretty okay about it, but as we go through the lyrics, there might be some nuance or context that we discover. So that's something we'll talk about more. Why can't he just make Johnny Boy? Why can't he just make a CD so I can play it much more and hold on to it? Because it's so fucking beautiful. It just seems selfish. Fuck. Yeah, I agree. I'm still a CD person. I'm a big fan of the Austin rapper DZ Brown. If you haven't listened to DZ's album Judith, you should immediately. It's amazing. It's the first, Kanye's up here, and the first artist since Kanye that really got me holy shit, I love this guy, was Kendrick. And the only artist since Kanye and Kendrick that also had me going, holy shit, I love this guy, was DZ Brown with Judith. So listen to Judith. But I actually emailed the manager of DZ Brown and was like, can I please get a CD? Do you have CDs? And they were nice enough to let me purchase one, so now I have one. And Johnny Boy, I'm with you. I wish I could get a physical copy of Ye. I'm hoping I can get a physical copy of Kids See Ghost, because that album cover for Kids See Ghost is so fucking nice. So nice. Jimmy, how can I meet Kanye and give him a hug? I wish I knew, man. I wish I knew, because I would be there wrapped in his arms, But maybe one of these days I can let you know, or if you're there first, let me know how it can happen. Who Jiggy back? Possibly the hardest question. What's your interpretation of the narrative, and do you think Kids See Ghost will fit into it, and if so, how? Again, this is our pre-analysis understanding of the album, just from, I have it playing right now, hopefully not to the point where this video gets taken down. But, I've been listening to the album over 50 times now, and we've talked about it a lot, but still haven't done our track-by-track, line-by-line analysis, so the interpretation could change a bit, but we feel very good and strongly, especially after having spoken to our source on the audio engineering team, that the album is structured in the way that it's dealing, how I said in the first question. Those first 3 tracks, the 4th track being reaction and growth from that. The album was viewed internally as a sequel to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy spiritually. Not like the character on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is the character on Ye, but more so that, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy was made in this point of crisis, and it was Kanye catering to the public because he had to make an album that restored faith in him. But then part of that was falling into the dark twisted fantasy. He had to become what everybody wanted him to be, and he did that. And the album's beloved, critically acclaimed, still considered his best by maybe 99% of Kanye fans, and 100% of non-Kanye fans maybe. But then getting to Ye, it's kind of the antithesis of that journey. Where dark fantasy was a descent, you have an ascendancy going on Ye. And Nicki bookends both of them. You have her at the beginning introing into the fantasy, and then you have her on the outro kind of marking an end to the fantasy, which lines up with Kanye reclaiming himself. Kanye killing the Yeezus personality, the new Kanye. Kanye coming to terms with himself. There's also something that I just find interesting about the fact that on the intro, Nicki's part of the album, but on the outro, she's outside of it. So it's almost like, I don't know, she's part of the fantasy on Dark Twisted Fantasy, but she's part of the real world on Ye. And that's what he's getting back to, just being himself, being real again, being authentic. So having it not be something that was recorded for the album, but just being this real world phone call that breaks you out of the album and brings you back into the world just seems so fitting to me. Whether that's intentional or not, I don't know, but just looking at it with what it's doing on the album outside of artistic intent has a lot of cool meaning to it. But narrative, yeah, same thing. That you have initially a talk about the personalities, and that I Thought About Killing You Today starts the descent into the mania, which is why you hear the screams in the background. Then you get Yikes, where that conscious voice that was first doing the meta-analysis on I Thought About Killing You is now in the background. And that manic version of Kanye, that ego-driven version of Kanye, is coming to the foreground. So you have that background voice saying, like, this shit is scary, like, get help, while the person out front is just saying all this ego-driven stuff. It's very Fight Club, like, to me, with that personality dynamic going on there. And then you get All Mine, where that thoughtful, conscious voice is completely gone, and you're completely descended into that mania, which that song gets much grosser, it gets much more misogynistic, much more controversial. It's one of the songs that people are pointing to as being the most problematic on the album. But that's kind of the intent, and serves as such a contrast to Wouldn't Leave, that you get that as the very next song. And then No Mistakes is that reflection on, okay, I need to be better. Like, I love Kim for sticking with me. I love everybody for, like, sticking with me. I still love you. I'm going to try to do the right thing and not make any mistakes. I'm going to squash these beefs. I'm going to move on. Here we go. And then you get Ghost Town, which is kind of this return to being a kid, this freedom, this sense of rediscovery, which lines up with Kanye getting away from being the performer and getting back to being himself. And then you have Violent Crimes, which is this changed man who's changed because of the dark things that he went through, becoming a more realized individual, a more thoughtful individual, a better parent, hopefully a better person for the long run. So that's our initial interpretation of the narrative. Again, some of that context and nuance might change as we get into it over the next couple weeks, but it's what we're going with right now. Snafu, hey, I'm finna inquire about the bipolar topic. Yeah, bipolar topic. I think he showcases it on the album. It's right there on the cover, just like with Which One. It's kind of crazy to me. There have been a few journalists, critics that I've kind of yelled at because they didn't see that there was a narrative going on the album. And even if not a narrative, a concept that was being explored with this front half and this back half looking at the two aspects of the mania. Though I guess you don't quite get the depression that you associate with the low points of being bipolar. You definitely get the mania. And maybe some of that depression is there at the beginning of the album. But they just seem to completely write it off. That there was nothing going on in the album, just a collection of songs. Like, it seems like a reach to be thinking more. And I'm just like, oh, it's right there on the cover. And it's just the dynamic of the album. Oh, man. But I've seen two articles where both authors are bipolar. And one said that this album felt more like Kanye using being bipolar as an excuse for his actions. Like, forgive me, I'm bipolar, didn't mean it, I'm actually a good guy. and saying that that's a dangerous way of thinking because you're the person no matter what you're doing. And you have to accept that and take responsibility for that. And it concerned the writer that Kanye seemed to be using it as an excuse, where the other writer said that Kanye saying it's a superpower and finding strength from it, was accepting it, and wasn't running away from accountability, but was saying, like, this is just who I am and I'm trying to learn and grow, but I feel very empowered by, like, being bipolar. I know it can bring me lows, but I also, it's me. It's what makes me me. So I think it just brings up conversation. I don't know if I'm in a position to make a value judgment. I think how he brought it up and what he addresses with it is very fascinating. I think he does it in a great way, in an artistic way. And I think it's something that people can point to and have a conversation about for years. And for that, I'm really grateful. I'm actually more curious to hear what you think about the bipolar topic, or anybody else that's watching that is bipolar or has family that's bipolar. What is going on in this album? What does that mean to you? How do you feel about that? Please let me know. Matthew Shedden. Oh, you can't see that anymore, and I can't lower it. So there's 3 more. Is he burying Yeezus? Was there another album canceled in this process? Okay, I'm gonna answer one at a time. Is he burying Yeezus? Kind of. I don't think it's Kanye necessarily looking and being like, okay, this personality is Yeezus, and I'm gonna bury Yeezus. Like, there's that continuity. But I think Yeezus was, in a way, Kanye, over the course of his life, having a better understanding of what's going on in his mind, and he's trying to express that in his art. And Yeezus was a byproduct of him having a better understanding that he's bipolar without really understanding that he's bipolar. On Yeezus, we actually have songs like Hold My Liquor, where he has 2 different voices talking about, like, I can hold my liquor, I can't hold my liquor. And just having that manic ego and that depressive voice that's more vulnerable and sad. He does that throughout the album, which is really crazy. And then Life of Pablo, you have Which One? So again, he's exploring these polarities and trying to find, not agreement between them, but find some sort of, I guess, agreement between them. Like, do I choose this one? Do I choose this one? Can I choose both? What does that look like? So I don't think it's necessarily the Yeezus character, but I think it's coming from the same place that inspired Yeezus, and that he's addressing that part of him. So in a way, yes, but in a way, no. Was there another album canceled in this process? According to everything that I'm hearing, yes. Malik Youssef, who's one of Kanye's closest collaborators, said that it's 99% different. We had spoken with somebody else that had listened to the initial album and named some of the people that were on it, and that it fit the concept of TurboGrafx 16, right? But that's kind of it. Charlemagne the God said that none of the music he heard on Visiting with Kanye was on the final album, and Kim said that she left for 2 days, and when she came back, the whole album was different. And she didn't get to really hear Wouldn't Leave until the album came out, and then she cried. So yes, there was another album canceled in this process, but it seems from everything that we've heard and read that a lot of the core concept was the same, in the sense that Kanye wanted to reclaim who he was, but maybe there were some shifts in him dealing with being bipolar, some shifts in addressing specific topics, like Kim being upset with him because of the TMZ appearance. So similar topic, but just a different way of going about it. And part of that is the fact that Ghost Town is a song that's been in the making long enough that it's what inspired Kids See Ghost. And we first know that Kanye and Cudi started working on that and went to Japan to meet with Murakami, who did the album art, back in 2017. I think late summer, early fall. So that song had to have been in the works for a while, and that song still fits onto the album. Even though it was moved off at one point and moved back on, it seems that Kanye was still working with this idea of returning to being a kid and feeling free. And while how he went about getting to that point changed, and that first half of the album is probably much different than what it would have been, that sentiment remains. So, yeah. Which I don't think is too uncommon in art. I know there have been a lot of articles saying Kanye was still working on the album up to the last minute because he changed everything. Like, it means that there's no meaning, no intent. That's not how art works. I feel like almost anybody that's ever created, and even the journalists that are writing these things, they know that they're making corrections and changes up to the wire of a piece being put in. It doesn't mean that your intent wasn't there. It just means are you best able to capture what your intent and meaning was up to that point. I mean, obviously more time is going to help, but it doesn't necessarily mean what you're putting out isn't quality, is missing any point or purpose. I always found that weird. I wish everybody had to work on an artistic project with a deadline just to see what that's like. So that when things like this happen, they're not just pointing to it and being like, oh, it can't have meaning. The same thing happened with The Life of Pablo, with the track list changing. People are saying, like, that means the album has no structure, it was just random, there's no narrative on that. But if you really look at the changes that were made, you can see that the narrative is still in place. The last 3 songs were always FML, Real Friends, Wolves. And Nina Chop, which was famous, and Father Stretch My Hands were always near the top, creating that change in energy from the beginning of the album to the end of the album. That's a character journey. So, yeah, I guess that's just me ranting on that point because I've seen it come up so much the last couple days. Matthew continues, is this the first album he did without breaking new ground? If so, where does it rank? Now, I think a major weakness in what we do is that we're not musicians, right? I can't tell you anything about music in the sense of notes, melody, pitch. I can't even think of musical terms. I tried playing a saxophone in 5th grade. The saxophone was bigger than me, so it didn't go well. So that's never been our strength. It's something that the Dissect podcast does really well when they're breaking down Kendrick, Kanye, Frank Ocean, because Cole has a degree in composition and music. Our focus is narrative, thematics. We're writers, we're critics, we're narrative artists ourselves. So we can speak to that very well. So the first album we did without breaking new ground, I don't think I'm qualified to say that. Producers, musicians could probably comment on that. Personally, it sounds really unique to me. I think the minimalist topic changes are really jarring for a lot of people, but also really cool in the fact that you're getting from track to track these different aspects of the psyche without kind of being eased from one track to the other. That's kind of cool to me because on the rest of Kanye's discography, you can kind of feel it's either something like 808s where it's one mindset that's just being explored, or you have something like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which is this gradual breakdown. And you can look at that from Dark Fantasy and Gorgeous being pretty sober tracks to Power being a little bit more ego-driven. And the end of Gorgeous is even a little bit more ego-driven. Like, I'm coming after whoever who has it. I'm coming after whoever who has it. To Power then being this like, but then descending into jumping out a window and letting everything go. That's this nice, smooth transition from one state of mind to another, where if he had just gone dark fantasy to power to monster, that's a much different album. Much sharper, much more jarring. And you even see that in the latter half of the album. Devil in a New Dress, he meets a girl, there's romance. Runaway, they're in a relationship and complications. Hell of a Life, he's on his own and lonely and fantasizing. Blame Game, he reaches back out to this lost love and finds out he can't win her back. Then he's lost in the world. And it's this gorgeous stretch of songs that really shows the emotional journey. If you go from Devil in a New Dress to Runaway to Lost in the World, that's much more jarring, but it also still captures the same arc. Yeezus and The Life of Pablo are also very smooth, despite people thinking that Life of Pablo is chaotic. It has a pretty developed and slow-burning movement towards his self-confrontation on I Love Kanye. I don't know. So if he's breaking new ground, I think with this structure, it's a minimalism that he's been exploring more in his own life, and I wonder if that could be something that kind of inspires other artists. Like, I think it's kind of telling that you had Pusha T's album come out the same day as A$AP Rocky's, and A$AP's is what, like 18 tracks or something, and feels very large and very long, especially when you're listening to Pusha T's Daytona, and you're just able to get through Daytona so many times and really relish in the highs of it. And then you have Kanye's album, which is very similar. You're able to get these like bursts of emotion. And I think as people listen to it over and over, it does become a bit smoother in the transition. So I'm going to be curious to see how that works. God, that was a long answer. I'm so sorry. If so, where does it rank? I don't know. Each Kanye album is doing something so unique. It's hard to rank them based on that. Yeah. Also, as people who love his trajectory, how does a lateral move feel? Is it one? I definitely don't think it's a lateral move for him as an artist, especially following how full My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus, and Life of Pablo were in an album where he's trying to feel free again. Letting all of that go and having this minimalist project that really recontextualizes our understanding of Kanye as he admits his being bipolar for the first time. You have to go back through his discography and really re-examine it. And I don't know if any of his other albums have done that. 808s comes out. 808s comes out, and you don't have to go back and listen to College Dropout and be like, oh, this is so different now. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy comes out, and you don't go back and listen to Late Registration and be like, this is so different. Same with Yeezus and The Life of Pablo. But when you get the kind of revelations that are on this album, it does make you go back and look at his entire discography in a new light. So even if maybe the music and the lyrics on the micro may not seem as powerful as previous albums, like you don't have anything as epic as Blood on the Leaves, there's a lot of nuance and context that this album provides that's really impressive to me in what it does to his discography. Okay. I still don't get how the 070 Shake outro fits onto Ghost Town. This is Michael Hinney. Fits onto Ghost Town, which I fucking love and is now probably my second favorite Kanye song behind Lost in the World. I think that's, Ghost Town's playing right now. We still haven't done our track-by-track breakdown. So I don't know if I have a good answer to this right now. I don't even think I've actually read all the lyrics to Ghost Town yet. I'm listening to the song now. it seems to be about acceptance. Like, I do this, I do this, I do this. This is just who I am. And when you have that kind of acceptance and that kind of feeling, it can build to this breakthrough feeling of, oh my goodness, I feel free again. I feel like a kid again. Like, I was calloused and I put my hand to the stove to see if I could still feel. And look at that, I do. Like, I'm alive again for the first time in a while. So I would argue at this point, without having gone deeper into it, that it's more the acceptance and then the emotional response to that acceptance, which almost has ultra light beams levels of catharsis and beauty and power to it. So I'll go with that for now. And that's it. Sorry this episode was once again so fucking long. Appreciate you bearing with me. If you want to support the channel, support us and our podcast, listen to the podcast. That's a great thing. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, all those places. If you want to help out monetarily, we're trying to get to $300 a month so we can have consistent creation of original merchandise for Kanye fans to, sport their love of Kanye and hopefully recognize each other. You're like, oh shit, you're wearing that shirt, hey. So we pay all artists that we work with $300. We're currently around $175 a month. You can help with as little as $1, as much as anything else that you want. All of that's appreciated. If you spend if you contribute $40 lifetime, you get a free shirt. So you could contribute $40 and then bounce, but all of it's appreciated. You can also follow us on Twitter at Kanye Podcast, and we have a Yeezus book coming if you're interested in that. More on that soon. June 18th is the release date, but pre-orders are available. And I don't know, I'm really fucking happy on the low key because we got a direct message from Malik Youssef today. And I think he's interested in coming on the podcast for a story. So it's really fucking huge and feels good after 3 years of doing this and just being like, when will something like break in terms of like getting that big break? And this feels like something. Hopefully I'm not jumping the gun and it turns out to be nothing, but I'm really excited at least for this moment. So I don't know. Thanks for letting me share that. Thanks for watching. And we'll be back tomorrow, the last day before we have Kids See Ghost in our lives. Yes. All right. See y'all.